Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to take a whole stack of fascinating sources and really pull out the key insights, the most important nuggets, to get you up to speed quickly. Today, we're diving into something, well, incredibly powerful. Those hidden psychological forces that kind of nudge us into saying yes.
Yeah.
Often without us even realizing it's happening. We're talking about those seemingly tiny details, little cues that can trigger these big automatic responses deep inside us.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels especially important now, doesn't it? With the crazy pace of modern life, all the information overload, understanding these details, these nuances can really give you an edge.
It really can. And the sources we're looking at today offer this truly unique viewpoint. It comes from a researcher who spent almost 3 years basically undercover.
Undercover, how so?
Well, they infiltrated all sorts of compliance professions, sales training programs, fundraising organizations, advertising agencies, that kind of thing. They acted like a spy almost, using a disguised identity, just observing the most effective techniques from the inside out. Like they'd answer an ad for a sales trainee, get hired, and just soak up the methods.
Wow, that's some serious commitment. So they got the real insider techniques.
Exactly, the nitty-gritty details. So our mission today is to unpack these sometimes surprising facts and give you that shortcut to understanding how these influences work on us every day.
Okay, let's do it. Where do we start? This idea of automatic responses.
It's fundamental. And what this researcher found really underlines how deeply wired we are for them. To really get a handle on this click-whir idea, as it's sometimes called.
Click-whir, like a machine.
Pretty much, yeah, like a tape recorder automatically clicking on and whirring out a pre-recorded response. And we can actually see clear parallels in the animal kingdom. It makes it a bit easier to grasp.
Okay, like what?
We'll take the mother turkey. Now, mother turkeys are, super protective, really dedicated moms.
Right.
But there's this peculiar, almost robotic quirk to their maternal instinct. It's almost entirely triggered by just one thing.
Which is?
The cheep, cheep sound of her young chicks.
Seriously? Not the way they look or smell or feel, just the sound.
That's what the ethologists, the scientists who study animal behavior in nature found. Those other features, appearance, touch, smell, they play really minor roles. And this leads to some, frankly, ridiculous situations.
Like what?
Like, a mother turkey will embrace a stuffed polecat.
A polecat, isn't that a predator?
Exactly, a natural enemy. But if you rig the stuffed polecat with a little recorder playing that cheep, cheep sound, she'll gather it underneath her, she'll mother it.
No way.
Yes way. And conversely, she might ignore or even attack and kill one of her own chicks if it happens to be silent, if it doesn't make that specific sound.
That's chilling. Her whole instinct is hijacked by that one sound.
Completely. It's under the automatic control of that single trigger. Click. Whir. She acts like an automaton programmed to respond to cheep, cheep.
And you said this isn't just turkeys.
Oh, not at all. Ethologists have found these kinds of blindly mechanical action patterns all over the place. Think about male robins. They'll furiously attack just a bundle of red breast feathers placed in their territory. Doesn't have to look like a robin at all.
Just the red feathers.
Just the red feathers. But they'll pretty much ignore a perfect stuffed replica of a male robin if it lacks those red feathers.
So the trigger feature is everything.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's the quirk in the system. These fixed action patterns are usually super efficient in nature. They get the job done. But because they rely on these specific trigger features, they can be exploited.
Which brings us back to humans.
Exactly. We have our own pre-programmed tapes, our own shortcuts activated by certain trigger features. And, most of the time, these shortcuts serve us well. They save us time and energy.
Right.
But they can also be used, sometimes cleverly, sometimes not so cleverly, to kind of dupe us into playing those tapes at the wrong times for someone else's benefit, not ours.
Okay, let's definitely unpack the human side of this.
Yeah.
Because that's where it gets, personal, right? This idea of having automatic takes running.
Hmm.
There's a famous experiment, isn't there? The one with the photocopier?
Ah, yes. Ellen Langer's Because experiment at Harvard, a classic illustration of this.
Tell us about the details. How did it work?
Okay, so imagine you're standing in line for the library Xerox machine. Someone comes up to you. In the first scenario, they say, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I'm in a rush?"
Okay. Seems reasonable enough. What happened?
Langer found that 94% of people let the person cut in line. 94%.
Wow. Okay. High compliance.
Very. Now, second scenario, the person says, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine?" Just that. No reason given.
And compliance dropped.
Significantly. Down to 60%.
Hmm.
Makes sense, right? Giving a reason helps.
Sure. But here's the kicker, isn't it? The third request.
This is the astonishing part. The third request was, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the Xerox machine because I have to make some copies?"
Wait, because I have to make some copies. That's not a real reason. That's what everyone in line is doing.
Exactly. It's a completely redundant, pointless reason. It adds 0 new information.
So compliance must have stayed low, like the second request.
Nope. It shot right back up. 93% agreed. Almost identical to when a real reason was given.
That's incredible. So it wasn't the logic of the reason.
It was just the word because. That single word seemed to act as the trigger. Click, were. The request had the form of a reasoned request, and that was enough for most people to comply mindlessly. Just like the turkey hearing, cheep cheep.
It shows how easily that automatic pilot can take over. We just hear the trigger word and assume the rest makes sense.
Precisely. It's a shortcut. Usually when someone uses because, they do have a reason, so we learn that shortcut response.
That's a fantastic detailed example. Let's look at another one, this idea of expensive equals good. Tell us about that turquoise jewelry story.
Ah, yes. This is a great one. It happened in Arizona. A friend of the researcher owned a jewelry store that catered mostly to well-off tourists. She had this batch of turquoise jewelry that just wasn't selling, even though it was decent quality and fairly priced. She tried everything moving the display, having the sales staff push it harder. Nothing worked.
Okay, so stuck inventory. What happened?
Well, she was about to go on a buying trip, and she scribbled this note to her head salesperson. "Everything in this display case, price X half," meaning cut the price in half to get rid of it.
Makes sense. Clearance sale.
Except the salesperson misread the note. She thought it said price by 2.
Oh no, she doubled the price.
She doubled the price of every item in the case, and the owner comes back a few days later.
Expecting maybe some pieces sold at half price.
And the entire case was empty. Sold out. Every single piece. At double the original price.
You're kidding. Why? Did the tourists suddenly become turquoise experts?
Not at all. It was purely the price tag. These were vacationals, likely affluent, who wanted good quality jewelry, but knew very little about turquoise specifically. So they fell back on a standard principle, a stereotype. Expensive equals good.
The shortcut again?
Exactly. They saw the high price, and that alone became the trigger feature for quality. They assumed, this must be really good stuff if it costs this much. Click, were, double the price, boom, instant sales.
That's just, wow. It perfectly illustrates relying on one piece of information, the price, and ignoring everything else.
And it makes a certain kind of sense, doesn't it? In our incredibly complex world, we can't possibly analyze every detail of every choice. We need shortcuts, rules of thumb, stereotypes. Expensive equals good is one of them. Expert says so equals true is another. They help us navigate quickly.
But they leave us vulnerable.
Absolutely. They are efficient most of the time, which is why we use them, but they can lead us astray, especially when someone understands how to trigger them deliberately.
And the store owner? She didn't just learn from this accident, did she?
Oh, no. Once she understood what happened, she started using the principle. If she had jewelry that wasn't moving, she'd often try substantially increasing the price first.
Exploiting the stereotype.
Exactly. Because if it worked, the profit margin was huge. And if it didn't sell immediately at the inflated price, well, then she could always mark it, reduce from inflated price to original price, and still benefit from that initial expensive equals good reaction people had to the higher number. It made the original price seem like a bargain.
That's quite shrewd. And it brings us neatly to our first major weapon of influence, reciprocation, the old give and take.
Yes, the rule of reciprocation. It's this deep-seated feeling that we must repay, in kind, what another person has provided us. It's a fundamental pillar of human society.
How fundamental are we talking?
Profoundly. Think about this. In 1985, Ethiopia was suffering from terrible famine and poverty, yet they sent $5,000 in relief aid to Mexico City following an earthquake there.
Ethiopia sent aid when they were in such need themselves? Why?
Because 50 years earlier, back in 1935, when Italy invaded Ethiopia, Mexico had sent them aid.
50 years later, they remembered that.
They did. That sense of obligation transcended decades. Huge cultural differences, geographic distance, desperate famine, and immediate self-interest. It shows the sheer power of this rule.
Wow. That's a powerful story.
And societies reinforce this constantly, right? We're taught from childhood to share, to return favors, and there are negative labels for those who don't comply.
Like moocher or ingrate or freeloader.
Exactly. Nobody wants to be seen that way, so there's this strong social pressure to follow the rule, which of course makes it exploitable.
And it doesn't even have to be a requested favor to trigger this feeling, right? Like the Hare Krishnas.
That's a key detail, yes. The Krishnas found that simply asking for donations wasn't very effective. People often found them annoying, so they changed tactics. They started giving people a small gift, first usually a flower or maybe a book. They'd pin it on you or press it into your hand, often refusing to take it back, saying, "It's our gift to you."
Ah, so they create the obligation first.
Precisely. Now suddenly you're holding their unsolicited gift, and the weight of the reciprocity rule kicks in. Even though you didn't ask for the flower, you feel compelled to give something back, a donation. And it worked phenomenally well for them.
It's the uninvited nature that's so interesting, like those address labels charities send in the mail.
Exactly like that. The disabled American veterans, for example, found that sending out appeals with a small gift, like personalized address labels, nearly doubled their donation rate compared to just sending the appeal letter alone. You didn't ask for the labels, but you got them, and now you feel a bit more obligated to send a check.
It's almost sneaky. But what's even more startling is how this rule can lead to unfair exchanges.
This is where it gets really potent for manipulation. The rule implies an equal exchange, but it can be used to get a much larger return favor than the initial small one.
How does that work?
Dennis Regan's study back in the 70s showed this perfectly. He had participants rating paintings alongside an accomplice named Joe. During a break, Joe would leave and either come back with a Coke for the participant, an uninvited favor, or come back empty-handed.
Okay.
Later, after the painting rating, Joe would mention he was selling raffle tickets for a new car and ask the participant if they'd buy any.
And the ones who got the Coke bought more tickets?
Significantly more. On average, twice as many tickets. The dime Joe spent on the Coke yielded a 50-cent return, on average a 500% return.
Wow. But maybe they just like Joe more because he gave them a Coke.
That's what Reagan tested. He also measured how much the participants liked Joe. And yes, liking mattered. People bought more tickets from Joe if they liked him. But the reciprocity rule was so strong, it often overwhelmed the liking factor. Participants who didn't like Joe bought just as many tickets as those who did like him if he had given them the Coke first.
So the obligation trumped personal feelings.
Completely. It shows that even people we dislike can significantly increase their chances of getting compliance from us just by doing a small, uninvited favor first. Click, whir.
That's a really important detail. It overrides personal preference.
It often does. Think about companies like Amway and their Buggy system.
The Buggy.
Yeah, it was a collection of Amway products, cleaners, polishes, toiletries that a salesperson would drop off at a potential customer's home. They'd say, "Here, try this Buggy for 24, 48, 72 hours. No cost, no obligation."
The free sample approach.
But it's more than that. The customer isn't just getting a sample. They're using up parts of the products. They're consuming the gift.
Which triggers reciprocity even more strongly.
Absolutely. When the salesperson returned, customers felt obligated to order the products they had partially consumed. Amway distributors reported unbelievable sales increases using this method. You feel indebted because you used their stuff.
It's a clever application. And it highlights that paradox, a small initial favor leading to a much bigger return. There was a story about a soldier, wasn't there?
A very poignant one from World War I. A German soldier, an expert in infiltration, was sent behind enemy lines, specifically to capture an enemy soldier for interrogation. He successfully isolated a lone soldier in a trench and had him cornered. But just as he was about to capture him, the enemy soldier offered him a piece of his bread.
An act of kindness in the middle of a war zone.
A small, simple act. But the German soldier was so affected by this unexpected gift, this trigger of the reciprocity rule, that he couldn't complete his mission. He turned around, walked back through no man's land empty-handed, and faced the wrath of his superiors, all because of a piece of bread.
That speaks volumes about how deep this rule runs. It can override even military duty.
It seems it can.
Now, there's another technique related to reciprocity. Rejection, then retreat, sometimes called door in the face. How does that work?
This is a really common one. You start by making a large request, one that the other person is almost certain to refuse to slam the door in your face, metaphorically speaking.
Okay, ask for something big, they'll say no to.
Right. Then, after they refuse, you make a smaller request, which is actually the thing you wanted all along.
And because you retreated, they feel obligated to meet you halfway.
Exactly. It leverages the reciprocity rule in a different way. Your concession from the large request to the smaller one pressures them to make a reciprocal concession, moving from no to yes.
Like the classic Boy Scout example.
Perfect example. A Boy Scout comes to your door and asks if you want to buy a $5 ticket to the annual Scout Circus. You say no. Well, he says, retreating, if you don't want to buy any tickets, how about buying one of our big $1 chocolate bars?
And you think, oh, okay, just $1, and you buy the chocolate bar.
Right. But the chocolate bar might have been his target all along. He made the larger request just to set up the smaller one, making it seem like a concession on his part.
I've definitely fallen for that. Gary Marshall used a version of this with TV censors, didn't he?
He did. When writing scripts for shows like Happy Days, if he wanted a particular line or word to stay in that he thought the censors might object to, he'd deliberately insert several much more objectionable lines elsewhere in the script.
Knowing they'd get cut.
Knowing the censors would demand he cut those worse lines. Then, having conceded on those, they'd feel obligated to let him keep the line he actually wanted in the first place. It was a negotiation tactic based on retreat.
Clever. And door-to-door salespeople use this for referrals too.
Very much so. Their primary goal is often just to get names of potential customers, so they'll first try hard to sell you the product. When you inevitably say no,
They retreat.
they retreat to the smaller request. Well, since you don't need the product yourself, perhaps you could give me the names of some friends or neighbors who might. It seems like a much smaller ask after rejecting the main purchase, so people are more likely to comply. Getting referrals was often the real objective.
It's fascinating how this plays out even in, well, really high-stakes situations, like Watergate.
Yes, the Watergate connection is quite chilling when you view it through this lens. Remember G. Gordon Liddy's initial intelligence gathering plan for the committee to re-elect the president?
The crazy $1 million one with mugging squads and kidnapping plots.
That's the one.
Okay.
It was utterly outlandish and immediately rejected by John Mitchell and Jeb Magruder. So Liddy retreated. He came back with a slightly less insane but still pretty wild $500,000 plan. Rejected again.
So he retreated further.
Exactly. Then he presented his bare-bones $250,000 plan, which included breaking into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, and this plan was approved.
Even though it was still illegal and risky.
Right. Magruder later testified they weren't overwhelmed by it, but felt that after Liddy had started at $1 million and retreated twice, $250,000 seemed, quote, acceptable. They felt reluctant to send him away with nothing.
They felt obligated to concede because he had conceded.
It certainly looks that way. Liddy's apparent concessions made them feel they should meet him partway, even on a plan they weren't enthusiastic about. The rejection-then-retreat dynamic seems to have played a crucial role.
And studies show this tactic doesn't just get immediate compliance right, it can lead to more follow-through and even future agreement.
Yes, that's a really important side effect. A study on blood donation is a great example. Researchers asked students one of two things. Some were asked directly, would you donate 1 pint of blood? About 50% agreed.
Okay, baseline compliance.
Others were first asked a much larger request. Would you join our long-term donor program and donate blood every 2 months for 3 years? Almost everyone refused that big commitment.
Understandably.
But then, after the refusal, the researcher retreated to the smaller request. Okay, well, would you be willing to donate just 1 pint tomorrow?
And compliance went up.
Dramatically. 85% agreed to the single donation after first rejecting the larger request, compared to only 50% who were asked directly.
Wow. But there's more, isn't there?
Yes. The researchers also tracked who actually showed up to donate. Of those who agreed to the single request directly, only 50% actually showed up. But of those who agreed after the rejection-then-retreat sequence, 84% showed up.
So they were more likely to follow through on their commitment.
And even more likely to agree to donate again in the future. It seems the process of reaching an agreement through reciprocal concessions makes people feel more satisfied with the arrangement and more responsible for carrying it out.
That makes the tactic even more powerful. Okay, so given how potent reciprocity and its related tactics are, how do we defend ourselves? How do we say no without feeling like a jerk or actually being one?
It's a tricky balance. You don't want to just reject every offer or favor out of hand. That's not practical or socially smart. Genuine favors and concessions are the bedrock of social exchange.
So don't become a hermit.
Right. The key is to identify when an offer is a genuine favor versus when it's being used as a compliance device, a trick.
How do you tell the difference?
You accept initial favors in good faith. If someone does something nice for you, accept it graciously. Recognize that you've incurred an obligation, and be prepared to repay it down the line. That maintains the positive social function of the rule. But if that initial favor is immediately followed by a request for a larger return favor, especially one that feels disproportionate, that's your cue.
The alarm bell.
Exactly. At that point, you need to mentally redefine the initial act. It wasn't a favor. It was a sales tactic. It wasn't a gift. It was an investment designed to extract compliance.
So you reframe it in your mind.
You reframe it. Think back to that home fire safety inspection example. They offer a free inspection and a free extinguisher. Okay, accept them perhaps. But when the inspector then launches into a high-pressure pitch for an overpriced alarm system,
You realize the initial offers weren't gifts.
they were compliance triggers, sales devices. And the reciprocity rule states that a favor should be met with a favor. It does not state that a sales trick should be met with a favor.
So you're free to decline the purchase without guilt.
Precisely. You can say no or even turn the tables. You could say, thanks for the extinguisher, now goodbye. You've identified the tactic, redefined the initial act, and freed yourself from the obligation. The same applies if they use rejection, then retreat. Recognize the retreat not as a genuine concession, but as just another compliance tactic.
It's about awareness and reframing. Okay, that's really helpful. Let's move on to the next major weapon, commitment and consistency.
Ah, the hobgoblin of little minds, as Emerson famously put it, though we should revisit his full quote later.
Right. This is about our deep, almost obsessive need to be, and maybe more importantly, to appear consistent with what we've already done or said.
It's a powerful psychological force. Once we make a choice or take a stand, we face personal and interpersonal pressures to behave consistently with that commitment.
Like the horse race bettors.
Classic example. Researchers found that people become significantly more confident in their horse's chances of winning immediately after placing their bet than they were just moments before.
Even though absolutely nothing has changed about the horse, the odds, the track conditions.
Nothing objective has changed, but their commitment has changed. They've put their money down, taken a stand, and now, to feel consistent with that decision, their belief in the horse's chances strengthens.
And we see this in relationships too, like the story of Sarah and Tim.
Yes. Sarah was dating Tim, but also another man. She eventually chose Tim, making a significant commitment. Even when Tim didn't follow through on his promises like stopping drinking, which is part of her initial reason for choosing him, Sarah didn't regret her choice. Instead, she became more committed, finding new reasons to justify her decision, convincing herself he was truly number one. Her actions, choosing him, drove her beliefs to maintain consistency, even when the original justifications weakened. We all do this. We fool ourselves to keep our thoughts aligned with past actions.
It's a powerful self-justification mechanism. How was this demonstrated experimentally? The beach theft study.
Moriarty's beach experiment. Really clever design. An accomplice would place a beach blanket near a randomly chosen person, the subject. In one condition, the accomplice just listened to a portable radio for a bit, then got up and walked away down the beach, leaving the radio behind. A second accomplice, the thief, would then come along, grab the radio, and run off.
And what did the nearby subject do?
Very little. Only 4 out of 20 subjects intervened in any way. Most just watched it happen.
Okay, that's maybe depressing, but fits with bystander apathy. What was the other condition?
In the other condition, before leaving, the first accomplice made a very small, simple request to the subject. "Excuse me, could you please watch my things?" Every subject agreed.
Just that small commitment, watch my things.
That's all it took. Now, when the thief came and grabbed the radio, the results were drastically different.
Oh, different.
19 out of the 20 subjects who had made that tiny commitment became, as Moriarty described them, virtual vigilantes. They shot up, challenged the thief, often grabbed them physically or snatched the radio back.
Wow, from 4 out of 20 to 19 out of 20. Just because of that initial small agreement.
It highlights the incredible power of even a minor act of commitment. It triggers that consistency drive. Once you've agreed to watch things, you feel compelled to act consistently with that role when challenged.
And this consistency drive, it can be a refuge too, right? A way to avoid thinking.
Absolutely. Consistency offers a shortcut through the complexities of modern life. Once we've made up our minds about something, sticking with it saves us mental effort. We don't have to sift through new information or reconsider difficult issues. It can become this safe hiding place, as the source material puts it, protecting us from the harsh realities that thinking might reveal. Automatic consistency can make us impervious to the sieges of reason. Just click stick with the original decision.
Which sounds efficient, but also potentially dangerous if the initial decision was wrong or manipulated. like the toy manufacturer's trick.
Ugh, the January sales trick. This is a brilliantly devious application of commitment and consistency. Toy companies know. Parents often promise their kids specific popular toys for Christmas. So what do? They heavily advertise certain special toys before Christmas.
Creating demand.
Yes, but then, and here's the clever part, they deliberately undersupply the stores with those specific advertised toys.
So parents can't find them.
Right. Parents have made a promise, a commitment to their child. They can't find the promised toy, so they end up buying other substitute toys of equal value to put under the tree.
Okay, Christmas happens, kids get substitute toys. Then what?
Then after Christmas, the companies start running the ads again for those originally promised hard-to-find toys.
And the kids see the ads.
And they remind their parents, you promised me that toy. And what do the parents do, feeling bound by their prior commitment, their promise?
They go out and buy the second expensive toy.
Exactly. They fulfill their commitment even though the child already received other gifts. It's a way for toy companies to smooth out their sales, getting a post-holiday boost by leveraging the consistency principle tied to parental promises.
That's disturbingly effective. So how exactly are these powerful commitments engaged? What makes a commitment stick?
The research points to several key factors. The core idea is getting someone to take a stand, to go on record. That's the crucial first step. But how that stand is taken matters.
Okay, what kind of factors?
Active commitments seem much more powerful than passive ones. Actually doing something, taking an action, shapes our self-perception more than just thinking or not acting.
Like in the Chinese POW camps during the Korean War.
A grim but powerful example. The Chinese captors didn't rely heavily on brutality like the North Koreans. They used what they called a lenient policy, which was really a sophisticated psychological assault based on commitment and consistency. They'd get American prisoners to make very small, seemingly inconsequential anti-American or pro-communist statements, maybe just agreeing that the United States is not perfect.
Starting small.
Very small. Then they'd nudge them further. Okay, if it's not perfect, what are some of the problems? Then maybe ask them to write down these problems in a list.
So they're actively participating, writing it down.
Exactly. Active commitment. Then maybe they'd ask the prisoner to read his list in a discussion group with other prisoners. Or even write a short essay expanding on those points. The Chinese knew that people live up to what they write down. There's something almost magical about writing things down. It solidifies the commitment.
And these small acts change the prisoner's self-image.
That was the goal, and often the effect. Once a prisoner had written something critical of his own country, even something mild, the Chinese might use it. Maybe read his name and essay over the camp radio, praising his cooperation. Suddenly, he's actively collaborated, maybe just a little, but that act starts to change how he sees himself. To maintain consistency with what he's done, he might start to believe what he wrote a bit more, making him more open to further, larger acts of collaboration. Dr. Edgar Schein, who studied this, noted that the majority collaborated at one time or another.
It's a chilling illustration of how small, active steps lead down a path. What about public commitments? Does being seen matter?
Immensely. Public commitments tend to be lasting commitments. When you take a stand publicly, you feel pressure to maintain that stand to look consistent to others. The Chinese use this by posting essays around the camp or having prisoners read them aloud. Once you're on record publicly, backing down is much harder.
There was a study about estimating line lengths, wasn't there?
Yes. Deutsch and Girard's classic study. Students had to estimate the length of lines. Some wrote their estimates privately, some made their estimates public, and some made no initial commitment. Then they were given evidence that their initial estimates were wrong and offered a chance to change them.
And the publicly committed students stuck to their wrong answers.
They were the most stubborn by far. Even with clear evidence they were wrong, those who had publicly declared their estimate resisted changing. They valued appearing consistent over being accurate.
So active, public. What else makes a commitment strong? Does effort matter?
Effort plays a big role. The more effort that goes into a commitment, the greater its ability to influence the attitudes of the person who made it. Think about severe initiation rites for fraternities or tribal groups. Anthropologists Whiting, Cluckhone, and Anthony found that societies with the most dramatic and arduous initiation ceremonies tend to have the greatest group solidarity.
Why would making it harder to join make people more loyal?
Because undergoing that effort and hardship provides a powerful justification for the commitment. If I went through all that to get in, this group must be really important and valuable to me. It makes the commitment internally consistent with the effort expended. People value what they struggle to attain.
Makes sense. So active, public, effortful. What about feeling like you chose to commit? Inner choice.
Absolutely crucial. Possibly the most important factor for long-term change. We need to feel we have taken inner responsibility for our actions to truly commit to them. External pressures, like large rewards or strong threats, can get immediate compliance, but they don't usually create lasting commitment.
Like the Chinese using small prizes in their essay contests.
Exactly. That detail is so revealing. They didn't offer huge rewards. They offered trivial things, a few extra cigarettes, a little fresh fruit. Why? Because they didn't want the prisoners to write those essays for the prize. They wanted the prisoners to write them because they, on some level, agreed with the content. They wanted the men to own what they had done, to feel internally responsible, not just motivated by a big payoff. That internal ownership is what changes self-image.
And Friedman's robot study showed something similar with threats.
Yes, Friedman told young boys not to play with a cool robot toy. One group got a severe threat. "It's wrong to play with the robot. If you do, I'll be very angry and we'll have to do something about it." The other group got a mild threat. "It's wrong to play with the robot. No mention of consequences."
What happened?
With the severe threat, almost none of the boys played with the robot while Friedman was briefly out of the room. The threat worked temporarily, but with the mild threat, most boys also didn't play with the robot. The interesting part came 6 weeks later.
What happened then?
Another researcher came to the same classroom, gave the boys some drawing tests, and then let them play freely with the same toys, including the robot. Friedman wasn't anywhere around. Of the boys who got the severe threat initially, 77% now played with the robot. The threat was gone, so the compliance disappeared.
But the mild threat group.
Only 33% played with the robot. The mild threat group had seemingly internalized the choice. They hadn't just obeyed because of the threat, they had convinced themselves they didn't want to play with the robot because it was wrong. They took inner responsibility, and the commitment lasted.
That's a really powerful distinction. Inner choice leads to lasting change.
It does, and compliance professionals exploit this with techniques like the low ball.
The car dealership trick. How does that work in detail?
Okay, so a dealer offers you a fantastic price on a car, maybe $400 or $500 below competitors. A really good deal.
The low ball offer.
Right. It's not a genuine offer. The dealer likely has no intention of selling at that price. Its only purpose is to get you to make a decision to buy that car from that dealership.
To get the commitment.
Exactly. Once you decide, okay, I'll take it, a whole series of commitment-building actions start. You fill out forms, maybe arrange financing, you take a long test drive, you imagine showing it to your neighbors.
You're investing time and effort, making it public, feeling the choice is yours.
Precisely. And during this process, you start building new justifications for your choice beyond just the great price. You notice the smooth ride, the nice stereo, maybe the color is perfect, it feels patriotic to buy this brand. You're growing legs for the decision to stand on.
Okay, so you're committed. Then what?
Then, just before you sign the final papers, something happens. Maybe the salesman discovers an error in the calculation. The air conditioning wasn't included in the price. Or the manager checks your trade-in value again and says the initial offer was too high and has to be reduced.
The original price advantage disappears.
It gets taken away. But remarkably often, the customer still goes through with the deal.
Even though the reason they came in the low price is gone.
Often, yes. Because the initial commitment has spawned all these other supporting reasons. The customer feels invested. They like the car for other reasons now. Breaking the commitment feels inconsistent and difficult, so they shrug, maybe grumble a bit, but sign anyway, never realizing the extra supporting reasons might have only emerged because of the initial deceptive lowball offer.
That's incredibly manipulative. It builds its own justification after the fact.
It leverages our desire to be consistent with a commitment we feel we've freely chosen, even when the original basis for that choice is removed. There was even a study showing this with energy conservation.
How'd that work?
Researchers went door to door in Iowa asking homeowners to try and save natural gas. Everyone agreed, but it had little effect on usage. For another group, they offered an inducement. Homeowners who conserved would have their names publicized in the newspaper as public-spirited citizens.
Did that work?
Yes, it led to significant savings, around 12% during the first month. The publicity promise worked. But then the researchers pulled a lowball.
They took the promise away.
They sent a letter saying, unfortunately, the newspaper publicity wasn't going to be possible after all.
So you'd expect the savings to disappear, right, since the reason was gone.
That's what you'd think. But instead, the homeowners in that group saved even more fuel, 15.5% in the following months, and they continued to save more than other groups for the rest of the winter.
Why? That seems counterintuitive.
Because the initial commitment, saving energy for publicity, led them to find new reasons for conserving. They started seeing themselves as conservation-minded, public-spirited. They'd changed their habits, maybe insulated pipes, lower thermostats. When the original reason, publicity, was removed, these new internally generated reasons were strong enough to sustain and even increase the energy-saving behavior. They had taken inner responsibility for being conservers.
The commitment grew its own legs, just like with the car buyer. Amazing. Okay, so this consistency drive is powerful and can be easily manipulated. How do we fight back against foolish consistency?
Well, first, as you hinted, it's crucial to remember Emerson's full point. He wasn't against consistency per se. Intelligent consistency is valuable. It's foolish, rigid, automatic consistency, the hobgoblin that we need to guard against.
So how do we spot when we're falling into that foolish trap?
There are a couple of signals. One is physical. Listen to your stomach. Often when we're being pressured through commitment tactics into agreeing to something we know we don't want, our stomach lets us know. We feel that queasy, tight feeling.
The gut feeling.
Exactly. That's your subconscious yelling, hey, you're being conned here. Don't ignore that signal. If you feel it when asked to comply with something you wouldn't normally do, especially after making some earlier related commitment, call them out on it. Tell the person, look, I know what you're doing and my stomach is telling me no.
What if it's more subtle? What if, like Sarah with Tim, we've already rationalized the commitment so much that our stomach feels fine, but our head should know better?
That requires a different approach. You need to listen to your heart of hearts, as the source puts it. Ask yourself a crucial question. Knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, would I make the same choice?
Like the gas station example.
Right. The author pulls into a station advertising a low price, initial commitment. He gets out, starts the pump, and then notices the pump price is actually higher than advertised. He asks himself, knowing the real price now, would I have stopped here? The answer from his heart of hearts is a clear no. The only reason he stopped was the advertised low price, which turned out to be false. Those other justifications that might pop up, I need gas anyway, this brand is good, are just rationalizations created after the initial commitment.
So that question cuts through the self-justification.
It helps separate genuine reasons from those manufactured, simply to maintain consistency with a prior, perhaps flawed commitment. Whether it's buying a car, staying in a relationship, or sticking with a bad investment, asking, knowing what I know now, can provide crucial clarity.
That's a really practical tool. Okay, let's shift gears to the next weapon, social proof.
The power of the crowd. This principle states that we often decide what's correct or appropriate behavior by looking at what other people are doing. If lots of people are doing something, we assume it must be the right thing to do.
Like canned laughter on TV shows.
Perfect example. Most people say they dislike canned laughter, find it phony, yet TV executives continue to use it relentlessly. Why? Because experiments show it works. It makes audiences rate material as funnier and laugh longer, even if they consciously find the laugh track itself annoying.
So the signal of others laughing makes us think it's funnier, even if the signal is fake.
Exactly. It triggers that social proof mechanism. If all these other people think it's funny, it probably is. Click, whir. Advertisers use this constantly, too.
Also,
Phrases like fastest growing, largest selling, they don't have to convince you the product is good. They just need to convince you that lots of other people think it is. That's often proof enough.
charity telethons, listing donors.
Same principle. Showing that long list of names implies, look how many people are donating. This must be the right thing to do. You should do it too. Bartenders might salt their tip jars with a few dollar bills at the start of the night to simulate prior tips and encourage more. Nightclub owners might create artificial lines outside to signal popularity.
It's all about manufacturing the appearance of social proof.
Often, yes. As one sales trainer put it, since 95% of the people are imitators and only 5% initiators, people are persuaded more by the actions of others than by any proof we can offer.
But relying on the crowd can go terribly wrong, can it? Like that Chicago Doomsday Cult study.
Oh, absolutely. The Festinger, Riken, and Schachter study of the Seekers cult is a fascinating, if unsettling, look at social proof under pressure. This group, led by Marion Keech, who claimed to receive messages from aliens, predicted a specific date, December 21st, when a great flood would end the world. But true believers would be rescued by flying saucers.
And these people really bought into it.
Deeply. They showed extreme commitment. Many quit their jobs, sold or gave away possessions, cut ties with non-believing family and friends. Their actions demonstrated immense certainty in the prophecy.
But what was strange was their behavior before the predicted date.
Yes, that's a key detail. Despite their conviction, they made very little effort to recruit new members. They were quite secretive, avoiding publicity. If you're certain you have the truth that can save people, you'd expect them to be shouting it from the rooftops, right?
Yeah, you would. So what happened on the night?
They gathered meticulously. They removed all metal from their clothing because they were told metal would be dangerous on the spaceship. They rehearsed the passwords they'd need. Midnight, December 21st came and went. Nothing happened. No flood, no saucers.
Total disconfirmation. What was the reaction?
Initially, shock, confusion, despair. The belief system that they had sacrificed so much for had seemingly crumbled. But then around 4:45 a.m., Keach received another message.
Convenient timing. What did it say?
It claimed that their little group, by sitting there faithfully all night, had spread so much light that God had decided to save the entire world from destruction.
Ah, a rationalization to preserve the belief.
A crucial one. And what happened immediately after that? The group, which had been secretive and publicity shy, suddenly reversed course completely. They started calling newspapers, trying desperately to spread their message, to get publicity, to recruit converts.
Why the sudden shift?
Because the physical proof, no flood, no aliens, had failed them, creating profound uncertainty. Their only remaining hope to validate their shattered belief system was social proof. If they could convince others, persuade converts, then maybe their beliefs weren't wrong after all. The more people they could convince, the truer their beliefs would feel. They needed converts not primarily to save others, but to save themselves from doubt.
That's a powerful insight. Uncertainty drives the need for social proof.
Immensely so. And this ties into another dark aspect of social proof, the bystander effect, or pluralistic ignorance.
The Catherine Genovese case.
The most famous tragic example. Queens, New York, 1964. A young woman attacked and murdered over a period of about 35 minutes, while 38 neighbors reportedly watched from their windows without calling the police.
It shocked everyone. Why didn't anyone help? Were they all just monsters?
Psychologists Latana and Darley argued it wasn't apathy, but two factors related to the number of witnesses. First, diffusion of responsibility. When many people are present, the personal responsibility of each individual is diluted. Everyone thinks someone else must call the police or someone else will intervene.
So responsibility spreads thin. What's the second factor?
Pluralistic ignorance. Especially in ambiguous situations, is that really a serious attack or just a loud argument? Is that person collapsed on the sidewalk drunk or having a heart attack? We look to others for cues on how to react, but everyone else is also looking around, trying to appear calm, checking others' reactions. Since everyone sees everyone else looking calm and inactive, they conclude, oh, it must not be a real emergency. The group collectively defines the situation as a non-emergency through mutual passive observation.
So everyone assumes nothing is wrong because nobody else is acting.
Precisely. Latane and Darley tested this expensively. In one study, a student accomplice faked an epileptic seizure. When there was only one bystander present, that bystander helped 85% of the time. But when there were 5 bystanders, the victim received help only 31% of the time.
Wow. The presence of others drastically reduced the chance of help.
It did. Interestingly, if the emergency is crystal clear and unambiguous, say, someone falls off a ladder and is clearly injured, help is usually forthcoming very quickly, regardless of group size. It's the ambiguity that fuels pluralistic ignorance.
And cities, with their crowds and anonymity, are prime ground for this.
Exactly. The confusion, the population density, the fact that you often don't know the people around you, it all contributes to bystander inaction without needing to invoke theories about urbanites being inherently callous.
So if you find yourself in an emergency needing help in a crowd, what's the best strategy? How do you break through this effect?
You need to reduce the uncertainty for the bystanders. Don't just yell vaguely, help, somebody help me. That doesn't assign responsibility.
So be specific.
Be very specific. Single out one individual from the crowd. Point directly at them. You, sir, in the blue jacket, I need help. Call 911 right now. Or, you, the woman with the red scarf, please come help me.
Why does pointing someone out work?
It instantly shatters the diffusion of responsibility, that one person knows they are the one being asked. They can no longer assume someone else will handle it. It also breaks the pluralistic ignorance. Your direct request clarifies that this is an emergency requiring action. They know help is needed, and they know they are the one designated to provide it.
That's incredibly practical advice. Point, assign, Be specific.
It can make all the difference. The author even relates an anecdote where he staged a car breakdown and general pleas got ignored, but specifically asking one driver triggered a cascade of help as others saw the first person helping social proof in action but initiated correctly.
Now, another condition that makes social proof especially potent is similarity, right? We're more influenced by people like us.
Oh, definitely. Monkey do, but especially if the first monkey is kind of like you. We look to the actions of similar others to guide our own choices.
Which is why advertisers use those average person testimonials.
Exactly. John or Mary every person telling you how great a product is can be more persuasive to other ordinary viewers than a celebrity endorsement because we see them as being like us. Their experience seems more relevant.
And this was shown in that lost wallet experiment too.
Yes, the Columbia University study. Remember, they dropped wallets with a note supposedly from someone who found it earlier but lost it again. When the note was written in standard English, implying a similar average American finder, 70% of the wallets were returned. But when the note was written in broken English, implying a dissimilar finder, perhaps a recent immigrant, only 33% were returned. People were significantly more influenced to follow the honest example of someone they perceived as similar.
That's a stark difference. It even works on kids, right?
Right.
Like your son learning to swim. Oh, sorry. The author's son learning to swim.
Ah, yes, the author's son, Chris. He was 3 and refused to swim without his inflatable ring, despite his father's coaxing and even lessons from a former lifeguard. Nothing worked. Then one day at the pool, he watched his friend Tommy, also 3 years old, swim without a ring. Chris immediately took off his own ring and paddled straight over to his dad. He explained later, well, Tommy is 3 years old, and Tommy can swim without a ring, so that means I can too.
The similarity was the key. Seeing another 3-year-old do it was more persuasive than any adult instruction.
Precisely. The actions of a similar peer were the trigger. And this principle of similarity in social proof has a much darker side too, the phenomenon of copycat suicides.
The Werther effect.
Named after Gresse's novel, where the hero's suicide reportedly sparked a wave of imitative suicides across Europe. Sociologist David Phillips has done chilling research on this. He found that immediately following highly publicized suicide stories in the news, there's a measurable, sometimes dramatic, increase in fatal accidents, particularly single car crashes, and incredibly commercial airline crashes.
Airline crashes, how could that be related?
Phillips argues that some of these accidents are actually covert suicides, imitated by people who are troubled and influenced by the widely reported suicide. The publicity seems to give certain vulnerable people the idea, making suicide seem like a more legitimate option. He found airline fatalities increased by 1,000% in the period following front-page suicide stories.
That's horrifying. And does similarity play a role here too?
Yes, and this is crucial. Phillips found that the imitators are most likely to copy the suicides of people who are similar to them. If the publicized suicide was a young person, the subsequent increase in fatalities is primarily among young drivers. If it was an older person, the increase is among older drivers. The similarity guides the imitation.
And this extends to aggression too, like after prize fights.
Phillips found evidence for that as well. Heavyweight championship fights that receive intense media coverage seem to correlate with brief increases in the U.S. homicide rate. And again, similarity matters. If a black fighter lost the highly publicized bout, the homicide rate increased specifically for young black male victims in the following days. If a white fighter lost, the rate increased for young white male victims. It's as if the publicity of the fight involving similar individuals lowered inhibitions for lethal aggression against similar targets.
That is deeply disturbing. It really underscores the potent, sometimes dangerous influence of observing similar others. It even sheds light on tragedies like Jonestown, doesn't it?
It does. The mass suicide at Jonestown is complex, involving Jim Jones's charisma and the members' dependency. But Dr. Louis Jolyon West made a crucial observation. Jonestown likely wouldn't have happened in California. Why? Because in Guyana, the followers were, quote, in total alienation from the rest of the world in a jungle situation in a hostile country.
Yeah.
They were cut off from outside influences, living in immense uncertainty in an unfamiliar environment. In that state of uncertainty, who did they look to for guidance on how to behave?
Each other.
Exactly. The power of social proof within that isolated, similar group became overwhelming. When the first few followers obeyed Jones's suicide command, it provided powerful, tragic social proof for the others in that moment of extreme uncertainty and fear. They had no other reference point.
A chilling convergence of uncertainty and similarity. So how do we defend ourselves against potentially misleading social proof when the crowd is wrong or being faked?
It requires vigilance. First, be sensitive to obviously counterfeit social evidence. Canned laughter, bartenders salting tip jars, staged man-on-the-street interviews and ads, nightclubs with fake lines. When you spot these kinds of manipulations, it should set off an alarm. Attention. Bad social proof here. Temporarily disconnect automatic pilot. Recognize the attempt to manipulate you and reject it.
So identify the fakes. What else?
Realize that the crowd itself can be mistaken, especially when pluralistic ignorance or uncertainty is at play. Just because a lot of people are doing something doesn't mean they know something you don't. They might just be reacting to social proof themselves, like sheep following sheep.
Like cars needlessly switching lanes on the freeway because other cars are doing it.
Perfect analogy. Or the famous image of buffalo plunging over a cliff, one following the other without looking ahead. We need to periodically look up and around, especially when we feel locked onto the evidence of the crowd. Ask yourself, does this collective action really align with objective facts, with my own experience, with my own judgment? Don't assume the crowd knows best without checking.
Good advice. Look up, check the facts, don't follow blindly. Okay, let's move to weapon number 4, liking. The friendliness factor.
This one seems obvious, but its applications are subtle and powerful. We simply prefer to say yes to the requests of people we know and like.
The Tupperware party phenomenon is a prime example, right?
Absolutely. Why do Tupperware parties work so well? People aren't just buying plastic bowls from a stranger. They're buying them from and for their friend, the hostess. Research shows the social bond between the hostess and the guest is typically twice as influential in determining purchase decisions as preference for the products themselves. You're buying to please your friend as much as, or more than, you're buying the product.
The liking factor is paramount. Charities use this too, don't they?
Yes, by recruiting volunteers to canvass their own neighborhoods, it's much harder to slam the door on or say no to a neighbor or friend who comes asking for a donation for the Heart Association or similar causes.
And that endless chain method in sales.
Right, used by companies like Shikely. The salesperson makes a sale and then asks the customer for names of friends who might also like the product. Then they approach those friends, mentioning the original customer's name. Your friend Mary suggested I contact you.
Ah, so now you're not dealing with a total stranger. There's an implied endorsement, a connection through liking.
Exactly. Just mentioning the friend's name injects warmth and connection into the interaction, making it much harder to dismiss the salesperson. They are leveraging the existing liking bond.
So what makes us like someone? What factors do compliance professionals exploit? Physical attractiveness seems like a big one.
It is, and often operates unconsciously. It's the halo effect. Research consistently shows we automatically assign favorable traits like talent, kindness, honesty, intelligence to good-looking individuals.
We just assume attractive people are better overall.
Pretty much. Studies on Canadian federal elections found attractive candidates received more than 2.5 times the votes of unattractive ones, and voters surveyed afterwards denied being influenced by appearance. 73% denied it strongly.
So we don't even realize it's happening.
Often we don't. In hiring situations, good looks can count more than job qualifications. Attractive people are more likely to get help when needed and are generally found to be more persuasive.
Even in schools.
Yes. Teachers tend to perceive attractive children as more intelligent. When aggressive acts occur, they're seen as less naughty if performed by an attractive child. There was even a study involving inmates.
Plastic surgery for prisoners.
Hertzberg's study. Inmates with facial disfigurements were given plastic surgery. Compared to a control group, those who received the surgery were significantly less likely to return to jail after release. It suggests appearance might influence whether someone gets convicted or receives a harsher sentence in the first place, rather than the surgery itself reducing criminal tendencies.
That's quite something. What about similarity? We touched on this with social proof, but it boosts liking too.
Definitely. We like people who are similar to us, whether it's in opinions, personality traits, background, or lifestyle. Car salesmen are often trained to look for and mirror similarities. They might check your trunk for camping gear or golf balls and then casually mention their own interest in those hobbies. Or notice an out-of-state license plate and say, "Oh, you're from Ohio, I went to school there."
Creating an instant connection.
Yes. Insurance sales data shows customers are more likely to buy from salespeople who are similar to them in age, religion, politics, or even cigarette smoking habits. The advice here is to be cautious when a requester seems just like you. In many small ways, it could be a manufactured similarity designed to increase liking and compliance.
Good point. And compliments. Flattery gets you everywhere.
It seems to work remarkably well even when it's obvious. Remember Joe Girard, the world's greatest car salesman? His main secret, he said, was getting customers to like him. How did he do it? Every month, year after year, he sent every one of his 13,000 plus former customers a holiday greeting card. But the card just said, "I like you, Joe Girard." That's it.
I like you. That's all.
That's all. He understood that we are, as the source puts it, phenomenal suckers for flattery. We tend to believe praise and like those who provide it, even if we suspect it's insincere or has an ulterior motive. Click. Where goes our positive response to compliments?
Okay, so attractiveness, similarity, compliments. What about contact and cooperation? Does just being around someone make you like them?
Familiarity generally breeds liking, yes. We tend to like things and people we're familiar with. There's a study showing you probably prefer your mirror image, while your friends prefer your true image simply because each view is more familiar to that observer.
But contact isn't always positive, right?
Yeah.
Like school desegregation.
That's a crucial counterpoint. Increased contact under unpleasant conditions can actually increase prejudice. The typical American classroom is highly competitive. Students vie for the teacher's attention and approval. This breeds resentment and negativity, not liking, especially across group lines.
So contact needs to be structured differently.
It needs to involve cooperation towards common goals. Muzaffar Sharif's Robbers Cave experiment is the classic demonstration. He took boys to a summer camp, divided them into two groups, the Eagles and the Rattlers, and fostered intense rivalry through competitive games.
And hostility erupted.
Big time. Name-calling, cabin raids, even physical fights. The groups hated each other. Bringing them together for pleasant social contact like movies or meals did nothing to reduce the friction.
So what did work?
Sharif then engineered situations where the groups had to cooperate to overcome a common problem's superordinate goals. The camp's water supply broke down, requiring both groups to work together to fix it. The truck delivering food got stuck, needing all the boys to combine efforts to pull it free. They had to pool their money to rent a movie they all wanted to see.
And working together changed things.
Dramatically. The joint efforts towards shared goals gradually broke down the hostility. Boys started sharing, becoming friends across group lines, even requesting to ride home on the same bus. Cooperation turned enemies into friends.
And this led to ideas like the jigsaw classroom.
Exactly. Elliot Aronson applied this cooperative principle to desegregated classrooms. Instead of competing, students are placed in small groups, and each student is given only one piece of the information needed to complete a group task, like one part of a historical figure's biography. They have to rely on each other, teach each other, cooperate to succeed. In the example given, a struggling Hispanic boy named Carlos held the key information about Joseph Pulitzer. His group members, initially impatient, learned they needed Carlos. They started encouraging him, asking him questions nicely, listening to him.
And they started to see him differently.
Yes, they started to see him as a valuable resource, a teammate. They liked him more, respected him more. The jigsaw method fosters liking and reduces prejudice through structured cooperation.
And compliance pros simulate this cooperation, don't they?
All the time. Think of the car salesman who pretends to take your side against his sales manager to get you a better deal. He frames it as us against him, creating a sense of partnership.
Or the classic good cop, bad cop routine.
Perfect example. The bad cop acts hostile and threatening. Then the good cop steps in, offers sympathy, maybe gets the suspect a coffee, triggering reciprocity, and seems to be on the suspect's side, trying to help them out of the jam created by the bad cop. The contrast makes the good cop seem incredibly likable and trustworthy, like a savior, someone working with the suspect. This manufactured cooperation is highly effective at eliciting confessions.
Okay, one more liking factor, conditioning and association. This is about linking people or things to positive or negative feelings.
Yes, it's often unconscious but very powerful. We associate people with the news they bring, even if they have no control over it.
Like the poor weatherman getting blamed for bad weather.
Exactly. People irrationally associate him with the unpleasant forecast and direct their frustration at him. Conversely, if he's associated with sunshine, his popularity rises. It's an innocent association, but it influences liking. Compliance professionals try hard to associate themselves with positive things.
Politicians kissing babies.
Or constantly associating themselves with popular causes or positive events, even if they had little to do with them. Gregory Razran's luncheon technique research showed this experimentally.
People liked political statements more if they read them while eating.
Significantly more. The positive feelings associated with eating unconsciously transferred to the political statements. It's basic classical conditioning, like Pavlov's dogs associating the bell with food. Link yourself or your product with something people already like. Food, celebrities, success, and some of that positive feeling will rub off.
This definitely explains the intensity of sports fandom, too.
Oh, absolutely. That raging, irrational, boundless fervor, it's deeply tied to association and identity. Whomever you root for represents you, as Isaac Asimov put it. When your team wins, you feel like a winner. It's a way to enhance self-esteem through association with success.
We see this in language, too, right? We won, but they lost.
Exactly. Cialdini calls it basking in reflected glory, purging. Studies found students were more likely to wear school apparel after the football team won than after it lost, and they were more likely to use we when describing a victory. Interestingly, students who had done well on a personal academic test were less likely to use we after a team win. Their personal success reduced the need to bask in the team's reflected glory.
So we use these associations to make ourselves look better, especially when our own prestige is low.
Precisely. Think about the massive celebration after the U.S. Olympic hockey team's miracle win in 1980. It came during a time of national unease, Iran hostages, etc. Americans needed that triumph, needed to associate themselves with it, display it, feel connected to that success. People were paying $100 just for ticket stubs to feel part of it. It's about deriving accomplishment from outside the self.
Like name droppers, groupies, stage mothers.
All trying to link themselves to success or fame through association. It's a powerful drive.
Okay, so liking is clearly a potent force, fueled by attractiveness, similarity, compliments, cooperation, and association. How do we defend against undue influence from liking?
This is tricky because many of these factors lead to genuine positive connections. You don't want to shut those down. The key isn't to try and stop yourself from liking someone. Instead, the strategy is to be alert for the feeling of liking a compliance practitioner more than you should under the circumstances, faster or deeper than you'd expect.
That feeling of, wow, I really like this person, even though you just met them and they're trying to sell you something.
Exactly. When you feel that surge of undue liking, let that be your signal. Not to dislike the person, but to mentally separate the person from the deal they're offering.
Separate the dealer from the deal.
Precisely. Acknowledge the liking, maybe even appreciate their skill, but then consciously focus your decision only on the merits of the offer itself. Is this car actually a good value? Is this charity truly effective? Is this club membership something I'll really use? Make the decision based on the product or service, not the charming salesperson.
That's a very practical approach. Don't fight the liking. Just compartmentalize it. Okay, weapon number 5, authority.
Directed deference. Our tendency to obey authority figures, sometimes even when it goes against our own judgment or morals.
And the Milgram experiment is the most famous and perhaps most disturbing demonstration of this.
It really is. Stanley Milgram set up a situation at Yale where ordinary people were recruited as teachers. They were told to administer increasingly strong electric shocks to a learner, who was actually an actor, whenever the learner made a mistake on a memory task.
And the shocks weren't real, but the teachers thought they were.
They fully believed they were administering real, painful shocks going up in 15-volt increments to a maximum of 450 volts, labeled XXX danger, severe shock.
And the learner protested.
Dramatically. Grunts, shouts, pleas to stop, complaints about a heart condition, agonized screams, and eventually ominous silence. Yet the experimenter, the authority figure in a lab coat, calmly instructed the teacher to continue. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on.
What were the results? It's hard to believe people would obey.
The results were horrifying. Despite the learners' protests, nearly 2/3, 65% of the subjects went all the way to the maximum 450 volts. Ordinary people, just following orders from an authority figure, were willing to inflict what they thought was extreme pain on an innocent person.
That's staggering. Did anything reduce compliance?
Yes. When the authority figure wasn't giving the orders, compliance plummeted. If the experimenter told the teacher to stop, but the learner bravely said to continue, 100% stopped. If a fellow subject, another actor, gave the orders instead of the experimenter, compliance dropped to only 20%.
So specifically deference to the perceived legitimate authority.
Absolutely. In another variation, 2 experimenters gave conflicting orders, one saying stop, one saying continue. The teachers were completely frozen, begging the authorities to agree. When they didn't, the subjects almost always followed their better instincts and stopped. They needed a single, clear command from authority.
It shows the immense power authority holds over our actions. Why are we so susceptible?
It's deeply ingrained through socialization. From birth, We're taught that obedience to proper authority is right and disobedience is wrong. Parents, teachers, religious leaders, bosses, legal systems, they all reinforce this. And frankly, society needs a structure of authority to function. It allows for complex systems of production, trade, defense, social control. Without it, you'd have anarchy, the solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short life Hobbes described.
So obedience is generally adaptive, a useful shortcut.
Usually, yes. Authorities often do have superior knowledge, wisdom, or power. Following their directives is often efficient and beneficial. So we develop this habit of automatic obedience. Click, whir.
But that automatic deference can be dangerous, like in hospitals.
Terribly dangerous sometimes. Studies have found alarmingly high rates of medication errors in hospitals, sometimes estimated around 10–12% daily. Many are attributed to mindless deference to physicians' orders by nurses or pharmacists. There's the infamous, almost darkly comic case of the rectal earache. A doctor mistakenly wrote orders for eardrops to be administered in the patient's rectum. Place in cheery was misread as place in rear.
And the nurse actually did it.
The nurse administered the eardrops rectally without question because the order came from the physician, the authority. Studies asking nurses if they would obey such a clearly incorrect order hypothetically found they vastly underestimated their likelihood to comply compared to what actually happens in practice. When the authority figure gives the command, critical thinking often shuts down.
So compliance professionals don't need real authority, they just need the appearance of it. What symbols do they use?
There are three main symbols that reliably trigger our deference. First, titles. Doctor, professor, judge, chairman, CEO.
Titles are hard-earned, usually.
They are, but the symbol itself, the mere label, can be enough. The author's Professor Friend noted how conversations changed instantly when he revealed his title. People became more respectful, more accepting, less likely to argue, and, frankly, more dull. The title overshadowed the person.
And titles even make people seem taller.
Bizarrely, yes. Studies show people perceive individuals with more prestigious titles as physically taller, and it correlates with real-world outcomes. The taller candidate has won 21 out of the last 24 U.S. presidential elections. The symbolism matters.
Okay, titles. What's next?
Clothes. Uniforms are potent symbols of authority. That experiment with the requester dressed as a security guard.
He got people to give a stranger money for a parking meter.
Almost everyone complied when he wore the uniform, even when he walked away and couldn't enforce it. Fewer than half complied when he wore normal street clothes. And again, people asked afterwards drastically underestimated the uniform's influence. Con artists use this too. The bank examiner scheme often involves perpetrators dressed in conservative business suits, maybe using a title like doctor, and sometimes employing an accomplice dressed as a uniformed bank guard to enhance the air of legitimacy and authority while they trick victims into withdrawing savings.
So, suits and uniforms. What's the third symbol?
Trappings. These are the accessories that imply status and authority, things like expensive jewelry and especially luxury cars.
How do cars signal authority?
There was a study where researchers blocked traffic at a green light with either a new luxury car or an older economy car. They timed how long drivers waiting behind would wait before honking.
And people waited longer for the luxury car.
Much longer. Almost all drivers honked quickly at the economy car, many repeatedly, some even bumped it. But with the luxury car, drivers were incredibly patient. Half of them never honked at all during the entire waiting period. The aura of wealth and status projected by the car was intimidating.
Titles, clothes, trappings. Simple symbols, powerful effects. How do we resist inappropriate authority influence?
It requires conscious awareness. First, ask yourself, is this authority truly an expert? Focus on their credentials and, crucially, the relevance of those credentials to the issue at hand.
Like the Robert Young Sanka commercial.
Perfect example. Robert Young played the beloved Dr. Marcus Welby on TV. He was widely seen as a wise, trustworthy authority figure. So when he appeared in commercials recommending caffeine-free Sanka, people listened.
But he wasn't a real doctor.
He was an actor, an expert actor, yes, but with zero medical expertise relevant to the health benefits of coffee. When we're clicking and whirring along, we often miss that distinction. Focusing on whether the authority's expertise is relevant helps cut through the symbolic influence.
Okay, check for relevant expertise. What's the second question?
How trustworthy is this expert likely to be? Are they presenting information impartially, or do they have something to gain by persuading you? Be alert for subtle tactics used to build trustworthiness. For instance, compliance pros might seem to argue slightly against their own interests.
Like mentioning a small drawback.
Yes, Listerine. the taste you hate 3 times a day. Or Avis saying, we're number 2, so we try harder. By admitting a small weakness, they appear honest and objective, making their main claims seem more credible.
Vincent the waiter used this, right?
Vincent the waiter was a master. When a customer ordered, he might pause, lean in conspiratorially, and say something like, I'm afraid the customer's choice is not as good tonight as it usually is. Might I recommend the slightly cheaper alternative instead?
Seeming to cut his own tip by recommending a cheaper dish.
Exactly. This instantly established him as trustworthy, an ally looking out for the customer's interests, not just his own profit. Having established that trust and triggering reciprocity, customers were then much more likely to follow his later recommendations for more expensive items, like wine, resulting in a larger bill and a bigger tip overall. He built trust by seeming to argue against his own interest initially.
Very clever.
Yeah.
So, assess expertise, relevance, and trustworthiness. Okay, finally, weapon number 6, scarcity.
The rule of the few. Opportunities seem more valuable to us when their availability is limited.
Like my sudden interest in the Mormon Temple tour.
Precisely. You had no interest until you learned that a normally restricted section would be open for only a few days. The looming unavailability, the scarcity, suddenly made the opportunity seem attractive.
How do compliance pros use this?
Very commonly. The limited number tactic is frequent in sales. This is the last one in stock, or we can't get any more of these. This pressures customers to buy now before it's gone. Then there's the deadline tactic, setting an official time limit for an opportunity. Sale ends Saturday. Exclusive engagement ends soon. Offer valid for today only. Child portrait studios might claim they burn unsold pictures after 24 hours. Door-to-door salespeople might say they can only visit a family once.
Creating urgency through time limits.
Yes. The underlying message is always, you can't have this later, which should make you want it now. It plays on our fear of missing out, FOMO. Sometimes it's used deceptively, like in investment scams where salesmen emphasize the limited time to buy before prices supposedly skyrocket, rushing people into decisions without proper thought.
Why is scarcity so powerful? What's the psychology?
There seem to be 2 main sources. First, it's another shortcut. As a general rule, things that are rare or difficult to obtain are often more valuable or better quality. So we learn to use availability as a quick indicator of worth. If it's scarce, it must be good.
Okay, the heuristic again, what's the second source?
Psychological reactance. This is a very strong motivator. When our freedom to choose something is limited or threatened, we react against that restriction by wanting the forbidden item more and trying to reassert our freedom.
This starts early, doesn't it? The terrible twos.
Exactly. Around age 2, children develop a sense of autonomy, recognizing themselves as individuals with choices. They constantly test boundaries, push against restrictions. No, partly as a way to understand the extent of their freedoms, threaten that freedom, and their desire for the forbidden object intensifies.
And teenagers experience this too.
A second peak of reactance often occurs during adolescence, as teenagers transition from childhood controls towards adult rights and freedoms. This is why parental opposition to a teenage romance can sometimes backfire spectacularly.
The Romeo and Juliet effect.
Precisely. Studies have found that parental interference often leads teenage couples to feel more love and desire for each other and to view their partner more critically after the interference stops. The restriction fuels the passion.
Does this apply to censorship too? Banning books makes them more desirable.
Absolutely. When access to information or material is restricted, like a book labeled for adults only, people report a greater desire to read it and anticipate liking it more than if access wasn't limited. Tell people they can't have something and they want it more.
Even in jury trials, like when a judge tells the jury to disregard evidence.
Yes, research shows that can backfire due to reactance. In one study, when mock jurors were told that a defendant had insurance, they awarded the plaintiff higher damages. But when they were explicitly told by the judge that the insurance information was inadmissible and they must disregard it,
they awarded even more.
Significantly more. The instruction to disregard made the forbidden information seem more salient and perhaps more important, leading them to use it more in their decision, not less. Psychological reactance strikes again.
So scarcity makes things seem more valuable, and restricting access makes us want things more. When are these effects strongest?
Scarcity is most potent under certain optimal conditions. One is newly experienced scarcity. Things seem more attractive if their availability has recently decreased. Stephen Wortel's cookie study demonstrated this nicely. Participants were asked to rate the taste of cookies from a jar. Some jars initially had 10 cookies, others only 2. As expected, cookies from the jar with only 2 were rated more favorably basic scarcity.
Okay. But what about new scarcity?
That was the clever part. In some conditions, participants saw the jar initially containing 10 cookies, but then some were taken away, leaving only 2. In another condition, the jar started and ended with just 2 cookies.
And the cookies whose supply dropped were rated highest.
By far, cookies were rated most desirable when they went from abundant to scarce. This drop from abundance seems much more potent than constant scarcity.
And this applies to more than just cookies, right? Like political revolutions.
Political scientist James C. Davies argued exactly that. Revolutions are most likely not when people are consistently oppressed, but when a period of improving economic and social conditions is followed by a sharp reversal. People who have tasted freedom and progress feel the loss of those freedoms much more acutely and react more strongly than those who have never known anything but hardship. Think about the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. It gained momentum after a period of post-WWII. Progress for Black Americans was met with continued resistance and violence, fueling righteous anger. The loss of newly gained ground is a powerful motivator.
That makes sense. What's the other condition that amplifies scarcity?
Competition for limited resources. When we have to compete with others for something scarce, our desire for it skyrockets.
Like an auction frenzy.
Exactly. The author recounts the bidding war for the TV rights to the Poseidon Adventure. ABC ended up paying an unprecedented $3.3 million for a single showing, vastly exceeding previous record. Why? Because they were locked in a fierce bidding war with CBS and NBC. The competition itself drove the perceived value through the roof. The executives involved admitted afterwards that the fever of the thing took over, leading to an irrational price.
And car salesmen use this too. Richard Strick.
Ah, yes, Richard the salesman. If he had a customer interested in a used car but hesitant, he'd arrange for another potential buyer to happen to show up for their appointment at the same time.
Creating instant competition.
Right. Suddenly, the first customer sees this rival, this lurking newcomer, also interested in the same scarce car. The pressure to decide immediately at Richard's asking price becomes immense. Add a third interested buyer, and the competitive frenzy often sealed the deal instantly. The competition made the car seem far more desirable.
Okay, scarcity is powerful, especially when it's new or involves competition. How do we defend ourselves against being swayed by it?
It requires a two-stage approach. First, you need to recognize the internal reactions scarcity triggers. That feeling of arousal, agitation, panic, the narrowing of focus, I need to get this now.
The emotional rush.
Yes. When you feel that panicky, feverish reaction welling up in a compliance situation involving scarcity, use that feeling itself as your signal to start short. Calm down. Recognize that your emotional response is clouding your judgment. Consciously put the brakes on.
Okay, step 1. Recognize the arousal and pause. What's step 2?
Step 2 is to ask yourself why you want the scarce item. What is its purpose for you? If you want it primarily for the benefit of possessing it, like a rare stamp, a unique piece of art, something whose value comes largely from its rarity, then its scarcity is a relevant factor in deciding how much it's worth to you.
Okay, for collectibles, scarcity matters.
But if you want the item primarily for its function, a car to drive, a tool to use, food to eat, a toy to play with, then you need to remember a crucial fact. The item will function just as well whether it's scarce or plentiful.
The scarce cookies didn't taste any better.
Exactly. Wurtzel's study found that while scarcity increased the desire for the cookies, it didn't make people rate the taste any better. Scarcity excites us about possessing something, but it doesn't enhance the actual experience of using it unless the experience is possession itself. So focus on the utility. Will this car drive well? Is this appliance reliable? Is this trip actually enjoyable? Don't let the thrill of obtaining something scarce override your assessment of its actual functional value.
That's a brilliant distinction. Focus on function, not just acquisition, unless acquisition is the function. What a fantastic exploration of these hidden triggers. It really seems like so often when making decisions, we just grab onto one single piece of information, don't we?
We really do. Instead of carefully analyzing all the relevant details, we often rely on a single, usually reliable piece of information, a trigger feature, and react automatically. Click, whir.
And this is becoming more necessary, not less, in modern life.
It seems unavoidable. The pace is accelerating, the amount of information is exploding. We simply don't have the time, energy, or capacity to conduct full analyses of every choice. We have to use shortcuts, stereotypes, rules of thumb like reciprocation, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, and scarcity just to keep functioning.
And most of the time, these shortcuts serve us well.
They absolutely do. That's why they evolved and why they're so ingrained. They usually point us in the right direction efficiently.
But the danger comes from
The danger comes when compliance professionals deliberately fake the triggers for our shortcuts. They give us counterfeit social proof with canned laughter or staged interviews. They manufacture liking through false similarity or flattery. They create artificial scarcity or use deceptive authority symbols. They exploit our reliance on these normally reliable cues. That is the real threat.
So what's the final takeaway for listeners? How do we navigate this?
Vigilance. When you recognize that someone is trying to trigger one of these shortcuts with counterfeit evidence, fake scarcity, phony similarity, manufactured authority, you need to, as we've said, disconnect the automatic pilot, but maybe go further. The author argues we should take an aggressive stance against those who exploit these principles for profit. Boycott their products, write letters of complaint, confront them on their tactics. We shouldn't just passively accept being manipulated. We should push back against those who poison these shortcuts for everyone.
A call to action. And maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Thinking back to Emerson.
Yes, let's get his quote right this time. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines.
The emphasis on foolish. It's not consistency itself that's bad, but the unthinking, automatic kind that lets us be led astray. So the question for you, the listener, is, how often are your everyday actions, maybe even your common sense choices, secretly driven by one of these powerful, sometimes manipulated psychological triggers? What other hobgoblins might be hiding in plain sight, subtly shaping your decisions? Pay attention as you go about your week. Notice these forces at play in advertising and negotiations and social interactions, even in your own thought processes. Understanding the detailed mechanics is the first step to navigating them wisely.